Hey everybody, it's time for session 3 of our conversations with Dr. Chip Dodd. I don't know if you have been getting a lot out of it, but I can tell you I am getting so much out of it personally. So we're just going to keep doing these conversations every single week. I think we're going to get together.
I'm in.
And we're just going to keep doing these. I can't pay you anything, but I could definitely take what you do and I could pretend it's my ththoughts. So that's sort of my future.
Spread the word, man.
That's my future strategy, is to take all the credit for your wisdom try to monetize that stuff. But no, I hope you're getting a lot out of this. I just want to kind of recap where we've been a little bit. Specifically, last week we spent some time in Genesis chapter 3, one of my favorite sections on all the Bible. But we actually talked about this question that God asks in verse 9, where are you? It happens right after they go and hide. We see God come in. We ask the question, Aika, which is, you said, an emotional question that's really a lament of the heart saying, I've lost you, where there's this disconnection that's happened. And then in week 1, during the first session, we actually talked about that we're designed for connection. We talked about the APGAR test and that connection, when we come out of the womb, we're actually not just looking for physical connection, but we're looking for an emotional one as well. And that same emotional need, that same need for human connection really is the key to discovering our true identity. And we've talked every single week how I love so much your personal mission statement of helping people discover who they are.
See who they're made to be, so they do what they're made to do.
There you go. See who they're made to be so they can do what they're made to do. And we're going to continue that. And we're going to ask some challenging questions today, but specifically today, we're going to spend most of our time specifically in Genesis chapter 32, which is the story of a character that you might know a little bit about. His name is Jacob. And so I realize that a lot of different people are joining us that may not have a lot of experience reading Old Testament stories. They may not know a lot of these stories, especially if you didn't grow up going to vacation Bible school. You probably don't even know anything about Jacob except for Jacob's ladder might be the only thing that you've ever heard of. You thought it was the thing at the playground. And so I just want to kind of maybe take a step back, and can we begin our conversation today talking about the story of Jacob? Can you just tell us that story?
Yeah. And you know what's so great is I didn't know that story, just like you. I'm one of the people you referred to that didn't know the story. So
well, let me tell you about it.
Good.
No, I'm just kidding with you.
But here's the deal, that Jacob was the second son who stole his birthright from the older brother.
Okay.
Through his mother's manipulation. So this is a messed up family. Tricked the father, who was going blind, and he stole the birthright from a brother who didn't deserve it because the brother was kind of sorry too. So this is just a mess.
This is like a Netflix TV show.
It's a reality show.
Yeah.
And so what's amazing is that Jacob, the word itself means to deceive, to be a deceiver. And in spite of being a deceiver, he's very, very blessed. Well, anyway, so he steals the birthright. He runs off. His mama said, hey, go to my brother's house, stay
go hide
there. Well, then along the way, he develops a calling and a hunger to come home. So he gets his developed wealth. He's been blessed like crazy. He gets his wealth, gets his wives, gets his children, gets his camels and goats and donkeys, and heads toward home. But he also knows he's going to have to face Esau. Like, Esau's coming.
Yeah.
He's going to kill him, probably.
Yeah.
So,
and Esau's a bad dude. He's a mighty hunter.
Esau is a tough guy.
Yeah.
But so is Jacob.
Right.
What's amazing, we think of him as like not so tough because he ran, but this guy, they're both a couple of bad dudes.
Pretty tough, right?
So long story short, Jacob pushes out all this wealth. He winds up being alone one night, the night before he goes and faces Esau. And it says that he went to sleep by himself, and during the night, it says the man showed up. And theologians think the man is Jesus.
That's right.
The man showed up, and it said that Jacob and the man began to wrestle.
Right.
And wrestling, Old Testament wrestling we're talking about eye gouging, neck punching, going for the nose.
Old Testament wrestling.
Yeah.
This week on Old Testament wrestling.
I mean, it's not slap and tag team. It's like
Jacob the bad boy.
and Jesus the man.
Jesus the man.
But please, all you theologians, don't go, I'm not listening anymore.
Right.
Kind of like, we're not making fun of it.
Right. No, it's just funny.
It's so
Old Testament
real.
wrestling.
It's so real.
Right.
And what's amazing is Jacob wrestles with the man all night long.
Right.
And the man says to Jacob at daybreak, you got to let me go.
Yep.
And Jacob wouldn't do it.
Yep.
And it says the man said when he realized that Jacob wouldn't let go. Now, what's amazing at this point, the not letting go, obviously Jesus could have crushed him at any moment. But not letting go means this guy would not drop his vow of refusal to be
Right.
vulnerable. He would not ask, seek, knock. He would not admit his neediness. He was always going to figure wily, shrewd, manipulate.
Angle.
Always the angle. And then what happened next is, you got to let me go. Jacob said, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. What happens right before that is the man dislocates Jacob's hip. He gives him a limp.
Mm-hmm.
This is good news, bad news.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? What's amazing is that only a supernatural or machine-like power can separate the hip joint from the cup. Every other joint in your body, any martial arts person can break and shatter, but they can't shatter the hip. It takes a machine-like power or a beast-like power.
Wow.
So Jesus touched his hip, which tells us right there that any time he wanted, he could have put Jacob on the ground.
Wow.
But he's calling Jacob out to vulnerability. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And now he's lying on the ground. He can't move. He's got a limp. And the man said, here's your blessing. Your name is no longer Jacob, which means to deceive. You're not hiding behind manipulation anymore. I'm laying claim to who I made you. Omni-relational God. Put him in a position to ask, seek, and knock. He gave him a limp that he'll never forget. Any of you grateful recovering alcoholics out there, all of you know that your limp, your disease actually brought you, if you're grateful, to a recovery you didn't know you could have. So those of us who have a limp also get to be blessed. And here's the blessing. He said, your name is no longer Jacob, your name is now Israel. And Israel means to struggle with God, and live. And means to have lived like you're created, to live a life bigger than you thought you could have, to live beyond what reality has taught you. I mean, to be fully connected, fully vibrant means to live fully, love deeply, and lead well, a life worth copying. And even, remember Andy Griffith?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Aunt B's tombstone actually says, if you leave your life in the hearts of others, you will never die. And so Jacob's being introduced to never dying.
Wow.
Because your name means Israel. You struggle with God and find the life you're made to have. But it's first going to cost you a limp that's going to bring you to neediness. And so much about Reboot is that the limp ends up being, I thought life would be one way, and it turned another way.
Yeah.
And now my limp is my trauma.
Yeah.
It's not God caused, but it can be. I know it's scary, but it can be God blessed.
Right.
But it's going to require that we struggle. And we talked about that earlier. It means the admission that I'm powerless over what happened, but I have some empowerment to speak about the pain of what happened.
Yeah.
It means I can turn over my control to hand myself over to help me, which is surrendering. It doesn't mean defeat. Right. It means to give back what's not working.
Yeah.
Control.
I think I've had the honor of discipling a lot of people who have gone through trauma. And one of the things that I find is that often their journey in faith is, for the longest time, it's academic in nature. It's addressing all of their concerns and the cultural issues and the social questions about what the Bible will mean, and really what they'll have to give up, the life they're going to have to give up if they decide to submit to the Lord. And there's a lot of these questions. But I think ultimately when it boils down to, there's a lot of people who are in churches today, they're in Christian life cycles or lifestyles today, but I'm not sure they've had their Aika moment, to reference last week. I'm not sure that we've had this moment of saying, God, I'm afraid that if I ask, seek, and knock for you, if I reach out, I'm afraid that you won't meet me where I'm at.
That you're not really omni-relational.
That you're not really omni-relational. And I think about this. And so we're in this zone where we're not being vulnerable with the Father, really. Maybe we're not even being vulnerable with one another, really, because I guess in that sense we're omni-relational, right? In that sense, at least we're two-directionally relational. And I think about that when it comes to this, then we have our own sort of wrestling with God moment. Now, maybe we don't physically have a wrestle with God, but we do. And we talk about, sometimes when we teach, we'll talk about that verse, makes me lie down in green pastures. This kind of forcing me to rest, forcing me to lay down in greener pastures. And I just want to ask you, if you're listening to this today, I want to kind of ask, have you wrestled with the Lord before? Maybe as a response to fear, maybe as a response to anger at him. Maybe you thought he should have dealt the cards differently in life. Have you wrestled with God? That's my first question. The second question I want you to consider is, if you have a limp, right? If you've experienced a trauma, I want you to answer the question, how did that factor into your relationship with God today? Does it still factor? Is it over? How does that limp, how does that trauma impact your relationship with God today? Brian on our team always says this. He says, never trust a leader without a limp. That's what he always says.
Oh, that's good to hear.
And he always says that if you meet a person who's got everything together, they've got all the answers, life is really good, and they're telling you they're in charge of something, he says they're probably not a leader worth following. And I think that's so good. And so we've been discussing this idea of discovering our true identity. And for almost everyone on this particular show who's joining us for this episode, all of us have been forced to come to grips with the limp that we have.
Yeah.
We probably tried to deny it for a season of time. And at some point, it wasn't just everybody else that noticed we've been limping. Eventually we were like, you know what? I'm limping a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, this is not good. My question to you is, you mentioned something earlier when we were actually talking in preparation of this. You mentioned that the woundedness may never fully go away. I think you were actually talking about sometimes how you feel a relationship with your family even sometimes, and you mentioned that something. Mm-hmm. Talk about if the limp never goes away.
I hope it doesn't.
Then what is healing? Yeah, tell me about that.
Well, see, I think the limp never needs to go away, but it can become a gratitude because the limp was the door that opened to get me to a place that I thought I would never come back to or get to.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, like the limp, for example, I told you during the break, I said, there are times because of my own limp, I look back and sometimes I think I get home and I'm scared enough. I would think, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Sonia, who I'm married to, I've been married to, I've known her like for years and years. I wouldn't be like shocked if I got home and she wasn't there. She had left me a note, said, I'm just sick of it. And I wouldn't be shocked, which means there's still this part in me that is wounded, unhealed, don't know when it will heal, but I'm not going to run away from it. But that, because of the limp, actually leads me to gratitude. So you see, I can go, I can say it out loud. Look, sometimes I wouldn't be surprised if you left, because you just could. It's like there's a part of me that always wonders, is it okay can I be loved? Am I worth loving? All that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Because at the same time, it's like she loves me a great, 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 great deal.
Yeah.
And so when we finally wake up, we realize we're never going to be worthy of love. We can be worthy of trust. We're never going to be so worthless we can't be loved. But we have to stand up and face that we're worth loving.
Yep.
As human.
Yep.
As cared for, in spite of our mistakes and so on. And so I just for everybody out there, like, trauma gives us a limp, and really probably had the limp before, we just didn't know how to face it. But it just because we remember where we've been doesn't mean that something's wrong. In fact, the greatest testimony is, this is where I was, this is what happened, this is where I am now today.
Right.
And we're always arriving until we finish this life.
Right.
And
I think the question that we're also asking in this entire identity, not just this is where I am today, because I feel like that's sort of where, bluntly, a lot of our reboot participants, that's where they stop.
Yeah.
And they exist in the present. But what I've been challenging us to do through these weekly reboots, through our podcast, through our courses, is to actually say, yeah, but where am I going to be? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's one of the things with trauma is we stop asking the question and we stop looking forward, because surviving the present is the current thing.
May I say something here?
Yeah, of course.
What's amazing is all this connection stuff.
Yep.
It actually is not just about returning us to where we were, but it's about reawakening to where we're made to go.
To where we're made to be. That's it.
Keep headed west of glory, right? Keep going towards the mountain range of redemption. But here's the coolest thing, that when we come back to life, we come back to the 6 freedoms. I've got another number here.
This guy. I'm not going to be able to remember all these. I got 8 emotions. Yeah. I got feel, felt, found, or something.
Find, face, feel. Those 3.
Find, face, feel.
We're going to get to the 4 imperatives.
This is good. We're going to do the 4 imperatives. First, we're going to do the 6.
Yeah, the 6 freedoms.
The 6 freedoms. You ready for this? Write these down.
These 6 freedoms are inborn. And what happens is, through wounds, trauma, neglect, ignorance, bad teaching, we wind up giving up our freedoms to belong and matter by being a fake, by being false.
Yep.
Now, here are the 6 freedoms. I was born, and this will return to and grow again. I was born with the freedom to see what I see. Like, I see something.
Yeah.
And then to feel what I feel about what I see. When I see something, I feel something. And so, like, if you see a cute little puppy or something, so I see, I feel. And when you have feelings, you're going to have needs. Now you're vulnerable.
Yeah.
So we're created to say what I see, say what I feel, say what I need, talk out loud about what's happening in my heart. That's number 4. And number 5 is, because of connection, I'm created to trust that somebody outside of me cares about those 4 things. Then I'm going to take the risk of, believe it or not, I'm going to take a risk of imagining my life in full. I'm going to take a risk of imagining myself in a full life. So see, feel, need, talk, trust, which leads us to imagining a future, which is what you just brought up.
I brought that up. That's for sure. Yeah, you definitely just took what I brought up and made it sound amazing. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I meant all along, guys.
Why don't we talk about a bird nest over there?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, that's what I meant all along. So let's say this one more time. So see what I see, feel what I feel, share, talk about it,
out loud about what's happening in my heart,
believe that somebody cares,
trust that somebody cares, and then that leads me to imagining myself in a full life as I was born to. See, when you start imagining, you're retouching the image bearing of God. We're image bearers of God. Yeah. We're created for relationship. God never gives up on us because he's always asking, where are you? And he's always calling us to come back to imagining how life is made, which means we got to be able to deal with pain because we live in a tragic place.
Right.
So struggle is sort of the key that unlocks the treasure trove of the imagination sort of thing.
Yeah.
By the way, I did a thing called The Boy and the Ogre.
Yes.
I want you guys to look. I did a thing called The Boy and the Ogre. I would love for y'all to look into. It's a story of freedom from codependency, something maybe for your future.
Very cool. And you get costumes when you order the book. Ogre costume. No, I do want to ask this just question to everyone who's joining us. If it's true that we're going to have the limp, if it's true that you're going to have the limp, we do an activity sometimes when we're doing Share Your Story Week. We ask people to write down what their life will be like 5 years from now. I want to know if that answer has changed for you. I want to know if now that you've hopefully grown a little deeper in your faith, because I can tell when I've met with someone who's on a discipleship path and their relationship with the Lord is deepening, their version of what they believe God's called them to extends further. So there's this kind of deeper and longer kind of phenomenon that can begin to happen, because so often I think following a crisis, following a traumatic event, we exist in this very short-term, immediate survival, safety, stability sort of phase. But when we get into this larger picture for your life, I want you to just take a second and say, hey, I wrestled with God about this, but here's today where I'm at. But most importantly, here's what I feel like God's doing in my life. Here's where I feel like I could be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And I have a business mentor that often says, Evan, why don't you meet with me? And he'll always tell me, between now and next time, I want you to hallucinate a little bit about what could be possible with blank. And he'll say something like, if I gave REBOOT $25 million, hallucinate, what's possible? And these questions used to annoy me because I would say, do you have $25 million? And he'd be like, I don't have $25 million, but let's say I did. And I have found that actually in doing that, I take off some of the limitations that my past experiences have put on me, and I'm able to see maybe what it really could become. I want to challenge you. If money was no issue, if time was no issue, if your lack of feeling of your own skills was no issue, what's your life look like 5 years from now, 10 years, 15 years from now? What could you do? Who could you be? As we kind of close out this third part of our conversation, first off, this has been illuminating for me. I can't just even thinking through the 6 things that I am free to do. My question to you would be, do we forfeit those freedoms? Are those freedoms taken away, or are they persistent? Meaning they're always, are we the only one that can turn them on and off?
We get invited to turn them back on. They're always in us, but they are pushed down.
Okay. And
the worst tragedy is that they can be pushed down so far they become eternally suspended. But trauma in and of itself says they're not eternally suspended, because trauma means you're still in pain.
There you go.
And it's just that there's a terror of taking the risk of imagining it again or reaching outside. I tell you, one of the greatest movies you could ever watch on trauma recovery, trauma experiences. It's rough, but it's called Good Will Hunting.
Yeah.
It's not so dangerous that, you know, it's going to throw people into the
Right.
pit, but it's very clear about somebody's reaching in,
Right.
and do you dare reach back?
Right.
And do you dare, and the struggle between that scene in the office with
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's
yeah.
not your fault. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go to see about a girl. That's
yeah,
my end of
exactly.
the
And
end.
he began to imagine his life 5 years from then.
That's it.
Got in his car and headed to California, which is always
That's it.
going out to the
But that's
future.
really him embracing this vision of himself is the whole movie.
Yeah.
Of
Yes.
who could he be?
And he returned to how he was made, reclaimed the 6 freedoms, got the heat. I mean, it's a beautiful story. Of
And also,
recovery.
he had not been asking, seeking, and knocking, reaching out to anyone. But Robin Williams was the first person,
Yep.
or whatever that doctor's name was,
Yep.
the first person who
Mm-hmm.
responds to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think I want to just say that probably the most painful thing for me in my job is, you know, if you look at there's an assessment that you can take. You can buy the book. It's called Strength Finders, and my number 2 on my Strength Finder is Maximizer. And I could argue that actually it's belief is number 1. I would argue they're pretty neck and neck. But it's interesting because of that, one of the most painful things is I can see someone's giftings and skills and I want to maximize them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the most frustrating parts is either when they don't acknowledge their own skills and gifts, or more importantly, they don't have the confidence to embrace them, or 2, they're too wounded to be willing to embrace them. And that's where they ask the fear. And I find myself, not that I'm God the Father, but I find myself asking the question, where are you? I find myself saying, like, you're in there. I see it. Come out wherever you are, right? In this giant game of hide and seek. And I just want to encourage you that if you have been living a life less than the life that you've been called to live because of woundedness, because of pain that you've experienced, I want to challenge you to come out wherever you are and to embrace that. And in that process, hopefully you could start by listening to those 6 freedoms, write it down, saying, which one of these 6 things, because if you don't have all 6 of them, you're not going to reach if you don't have all 5 of them, you're not going to reach number 6.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to have needs and express those needs and be around people who are finding, facing, and feeling enough that they can now receive and reciprocate to the point that now you can say, okay, I'm around a group of people who care when I talk. I'm allowed to express my needs. I'm allowed to feel my needs. I'm allowed to see my needs, and I can express those. And that's really the needs of the heart, which is one of Chip's books. I encourage you to check it out. You can get it on Amazon or any of those places. It's called Needs of the Heart. It's a fantastic resource for you on that subject. If you're like a person that maybe feels sometimes like you're a non-person, or you're a person that doesn't know how to express your needs, maybe this will help give you some vernacular, or some vocabulary rather, to be able to use. Other resources, go check out his podcast. He's got several of them. The newest one is called
Living with Heart.
Living with
From
Heart.
Birth to Death.
Yeah, go check that out. Please go share that. It'd be a great one. After you finish this episode, go listen to that one. We have 2 more parts of these conversations. If you have questions you want us to answer, shoot us a message on Facebook, shoot us a message.